7 o'clock and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Lori Troe and I am the president of the Salina League of Women Voters. And I want to welcome you all here to our Fall Issues Forum that we do every year. We always try to pick a topic that has some meaning to the city and our community. So I'm just glad to welcome you here and to introduce Larry Black. He has an MS in counseling psychology. He's a licensed clinical addiction counselor. He's been a substance abuse counselor in Kansas since 2002. He spent 16 years with Valley Hope. He has served as program director at the Norton Valley Hope, and he is currently serving as director of the OUD Grant Outreach and Admission at CKF here in Salina. So I'm proud to introduce Larry.
I've been in this field since 2002. I used to be an old radio guy. We owned the radio station, and I did play-by-play, and I did sports, and I did news, and did disc jockey show, and I tried to sell ads, but I stink at it, which is why I'm not in the radio business anymore. As I'm here today, I'm here not just because this is my job. I'm here because this is my passion. Yeah. What would you say are the primary drugs of choice right now? What things do you think that we treat most in addiction in here west? Thoughts?
Alcohol.
Alcohol, absolutely number one. Yep. You know, it's almost like whenever we bring somebody into treatment, we can just write down alcohol because it ends up being a part of just about everybody's addiction. And the thing is, it's so accessible and it's so socially accepted. And society teaches us that alcohol is a solution to a problem. If I'm having a rough day, I go pop a beer and I feel better. A glass of wine at night. It's the way we're indoctrinated. And that carries down. So other than alcohol, what else do you think? What else do you think is what's that?
Codeine.
Interesting. Like cold medications, codeine?
No, I was thinking more like Tylenol number 3.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Not one we think of very often when we think about things that people get addicted to. Will quercetin fall under that?
Yeah,
Maybe a little? I've just treated quite a few young people who will come in and they'll just be taking bottles and bottles of that. Any other thoughts?
Cocaine?
Cocaine, some, not very often.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say that you're wrong. I'm just saying we don't get as many cocaine people for treatment here. Now, when I was at Valley Hope, we had a center in Chandler, Arizona. We had a center in Denver, Colorado. Those places treat a lot more cocaine people. Any idea why we don't so much here? Any thoughts about that?
More expensive? More expensive?
Absolutely more expensive. It's a very expensive drug habit to have, and the socioeconomic levels out in where we are significantly less than they are in Kansas City area, in Denver, and those kinds of places. So we don't see as much of that, although we do see some. It's really rampant. That's really rampant among people who have high energy jobs, like car dealers and people who work and run casinos, that kind of thing. Any other thoughts? We're missing probably the biggest
marijuana.
Meth, absolutely. This is a big meth place. Western Kansas is much more methamphetamine than you'll find in a lot of the cities. It's much less expensive. It's easier to get a hold of. You can figure out online how to make it yourself, and that is so that's a pretty big one. And then marijuana obviously is the other one that we see a lot of people. So and we have the biggest conversations, especially with young people, about why marijuana is okay and why it's not okay. Marijuana is becoming legal in a lot of places. Doesn't change how we treat people. It doesn't. Absolutely. Thank you. Because all the reasons are that it's legal, or I mean it's becoming legal, so it's okay to use it. There aren't any problems associated with that. But there are a lot of problems associated with marijuana. If you have a job and you Run into somebody with your forklift and they take your, and they test your blood and you're positive for marijuana, you're losing your job and you're losing the company's insurance for you and you're gonna pay for that person's injuries. So anyway, that's most of what we see around here. We're starting to see more and more opiates, however. We're not seeing a lot of heroin here yet, although it's coming. We're seeing primarily people who are hooked on prescription drugs. And this is where this whole thing is building. This has been declared a national emergency, the opiate crisis. Keep your fingers crossed. The grant that we're working under now, I think, is going to be doubled next year because they're starting to see some benefits from it. They're starting to see how big of a problem this is. But places like Ohio and West Virginia, where this kind of started there and moving this way, they've had hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people die. People dying every day from this. We're not there yet, but that's why it's important that we get the word out now, so that we can begin to make headway on setting the groundwork so that we can provide help and we can be aware when this flood hits us. So I want to talk a little about, first of all, the organization that I'm with. We used to be called Central Kansas Foundation, but nobody knew what the heck that meant. So we're now CKF Addiction Treatment, which is a little bit more descriptive. We've been here for more than 50 years now, and providing quality service to the folks in Salina area and in western Kansas. We provide services. We have offices in Salina, McPherson, Abilene, and Junction City. The last three are outpatient only. Here in Salina, we also provide inpatient services. I want to talk a little bit about the differences between those services after I get through with this part. Right now we have a 24-bed detox center. We are moving to a new building. I think it's on Elm Street. And we're going to be up to a 30-bed facility there. So that's going to be really nice to be able to help a few more people. One of the things that we're trying to push with this grant and trying to get people to understand is the importance of medication-assisted treatment. I went through most of my career as a substance abuse counselor absolutely sold on 12-step recovery. Anybody familiar with 12-step recovery at all? Yeah. A lot of you have been, yeah. And I think it's the most wonderful program we've given. I think it's directly inspired from God. Back in the 30s, do you know how they treated people with alcohol problems? Locked them up. Yeah, locked them up. Waited until they detoxed and then sent them back out on the streets again so they went drinking again. But these two guys, Bill W. and Dr. Bob, came up with the idea that that I can stay well by helping someone else who's in need. Getting out of my own ego and getting out of my own self and giving to someone else, and it's stayed pretty much unchanged since like 1935. So I was pretty much against this methadone thing. I felt like it was just trading one drug for another. Anybody felt that way? Anybody else? Yeah. That's the way I felt for a really long time. And then the more I heard about it and the more I saw people come to us and they know their life's falling apart. And they're trying as hard as they can. They really, really, really are trying, you know? They're wanting to change their lives. And detox, withdrawal from opiates is just a horrible experience. People feel like that restless leg syndrome they talk about, 24 hours a day, cannot hold your legs still. Their skin feels like there's bugs and stuff crawling on it all the time. They feel like about the worst flu they've ever had, and it goes on for days and days and days. And so what happens is they give up. They can't take it anymore, and so they give up. So I'm becoming more and more a proponent that we have to find some way to help them stick with the program long enough to tolerate to ease the pain enough that they can tolerate it and be able to actually get the things that we're trying to teach them so they can figure out how to make their lives better. People who are addicted do not generally want to live like that. Who would volunteer to give away everything you care about, to lose your family, to lose your possessions, to lose your self-esteem, to steal, to sell your body, to do all the things addicts do? Nobody in their right mind would want to do that. But they don't know another way out. And until we can get people to the point where they can start to think again, we lose way, way, way too many of them. Anybody here familiar with the concept of tolerance? Why this has become such a big deal is the concept of tolerance. I will have people come into my treatment center using 60 or 80 Lortabs a day. Can you imagine taking that many? You know what would happen to you or me if we tried to take 60 or 80 Lortab today?
We'd be dead.
Yep, we'd be dead in a doornail. We would not survive. But these people have been on those medications and starting out at lower levels. They may take what's prescribed, maybe 4 pills a day. But then over time, the body develops a tolerance to that. And the 4 pills a day isn't working anymore. So then the next thing you know, they add, well, I'll just take 2, and they're up to 8 a day. And the ability for the drug to do what it's prescribed to do diminishes over time. That's why opiates were never intended to be a long-term treatment for pain. Never intended for that. It's intended for acute pain. But things came together so that this became the easiest and most readily available way to deal with people's pain. And we're going to talk about the history and how this came about. So the point of this, what I'm trying to say, there are 2 medications. There's methadone and then there's Suboxone, which are used readily in detoxification for opiate folks. And sometimes they have to stay on this for up to maybe 5 or 6 months. But our overall goal is to get people off, to get people to where they don't have to have any medication at all to live a normal life. But it's not a 1 or 2 day process. One of the things that's discouraging when you're in inpatient treatment is not everybody, but a lot of people think that we send you to treatment for 30 days and you come out fixed. Everything's fine. Not the way it works. It's really strange when you take a look at how the brain works when it comes to addiction. Everybody here is probably familiar with how habits are formed, how you form habits in your own life, right? You keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and then you don't even have to think about doing it. Does anyone remember the first time you ever tried to drive a car? You remember that when you were, 14, 15, 12, whatever it was? Anybody else nervous besides me? My dad trying to teach me on this old 3 on the tree thing, and I'm trying to figure out when to push down the clutch and shift and brake and turn and signals and mirrors, and I'm like, I don't do this anymore, Dad. Plus he was yelling at me all the time. Remember, you had to think about everything. Now, think about the last time you were in a car. How much time did you spend actually thinking about the process of driving? Any? Probably not. It comes naturally, doesn't it? Because we've done it so many times. Now, we have to watch traffic, and we have to pay attention to backup, but we don't have to pay attention to, how to shift the car and to drive. We don't have to pay attention to the things that we do naturally every day. Our brain creates these pathways. Works really good in the short term, doesn't work worth a darn in the long term, because what happens is tolerance kicks in, and now it takes 10 pills to feel the way 1 pill used to make me feel, and it takes 40 pills, and now I can't afford 40 pills anymore, so I'm stealing from my mom, and I'm robbing people, and I'm doing all of these things because I can't figure out how to live any other way. I have no other tools. It's why I was never back. I think there's a couple people here in my age group who remember the Reagan years and the slogan. Remember what that was? Just say no. Problem is, we're taking people who have one solution that works for them every time, and we're taking it away from them, and we're giving them nothing to replace it. So a lot of treatment is teaching people that there are other ways, and begin send them different way down that cow path in their brain so that they don't. But that's why this is such a long range thing. It's why the recidivism rate is so high among people. They're so used to getting that instant gratification, because you know what? If you're changing the way you behave rather than taking a pill to feel differently, that's a long, slow process. If I take a Xanax for my anxiety, I'm going to feel better like that. If I take an opiate, I'm going to feel better like that. So one of the things that we're trying to do is keep people in the program long enough that we can begin to teach them different ways. We can create a new cowpath in their brain. I want to talk to you a little bit about how we're working this grant. The counties that are starred, which does include Saline County, Dickinson County, Geary, and Riley right around here, are the ones that have been identified as the most at-risk counties among our 65 in western Kansas. The reason for that is what we did is we took per capita number of prescriptions written for opiates. And these are the highest counties. Now, at first I questioned this because it's the highest population counties, but they allowed for that. And so it's the per population, these are the counties that are most at risk. So that's why we're kind of starting we want to try to help everybody, but we're trying to focus on the ones that are most at risk. And your county is one of the ones that's most at risk right now because of the number of people who are prescribed and are taking opiates on a daily basis. Okay. So, is this really a problem? According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the FDA, lethal heroin overdoses quadrupled between 2000 and 2013. That was the same time the number of opioid prescriptions doubled. They go hand in hand. People move from legal opiates, from prescription drugs, to heroin. I'm going to tell you how it happened. However, it's actually more critical than that because that rate only increased 6% a year during those years. Between 2010 and 2013, which is the last one I have this data for, it went up 37%, which is even greater than quadruple. So it's getting worse, and that's why I say it's a tidal wave that's coming our way. We talked earlier about the drugs most people use. There are two in particular that scared the bejeebers out of me. Opiates and benzodiazepines. They're the most difficult to withdraw from. They're the most easy to get hooked on, the most easy to get addicted to. As you can see, the number of prescriptions by class, opioids far outweighs any of the other drugs. And so that many people are relying on opiates on a daily basis to be able to survive. And we know the addictive properties of these drugs. We have a snowball rolling downhill. Now I want to talk about benzos just a little bit. Anybody know what a benzodiazepine is besides you? Anybody know? It's the anti-anxiety medications. Valium, Klonopin, Xanax. Forgetting? Think of any others? Anyway, this goes along to what I talked about earlier, which is that our society feels entitled these days, and I'm not talking about every single person in our society, but our society in general feels entitled to feel better at a moment's notice. If I don't feel good now, I need a pill that'll make me feel better. Life and dealing with other people is an anxiety-creating thing. Not everyone agrees with you. Not everyone obeys traffic laws like you do. There's lots of things that cause anxiety for us. There's also another feeling or emotion or behavior that's closely associated with that, and it's guilt and shame. Let's say that we have a woman who's cheating on her husband. She goes home every night, lays in the same bed with him, and feels horribly guilty and ashamed because of what she's done. Her anxiety level is going to be through the roof. What if I get caught? What if the other guy talks? What if somebody saw us? What if? And so that creates a lot of anxiety. So to relieve that, we're going to go take a pill so that I feel better. I haven't changed my behavior. I've not gotten honest about the lie I'm living. I haven't changed anything about my life except I've taken a pill so I will feel better. What kind of a thing is that creating in our families and in our life when we don't get to the root of the problem? What we're doing is slapping a Band-Aid on it so that we can feel better. And again, when you do that with some of the most addictive medications on the planet, we have a huge problem developing. So those are the things I want to be particularly concerned about. Yeah?
So you mentioned the anti-anxiety drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Are those also known as antidepressants? I've heard of those.
No, they're completely different.
Completely different.
Antidepressants they're generally not addictive. They have a tendency to increase the serotonin in your brain, just so that your downs feel a little less down. Those anti-anxiety medicines work really quickly to take away all of that, and which is why they're so addictive.
And which ones are the SSRIs?
That's an antidepressant. And we as a treatment facility are firmly behind antidepressants to help bring the bottom up a little bit. There's a what I want to say, an affliction known as anhedonia. What it means is the inability to feel pleasure. If you've got someone who's been using drugs, if they've been using benzos, if they've been using opiates, if they've been smoking pot, if they've been using methamphetamine to make themselves feel better for a very long time, they're wearing out the pleasure sensors. They're burning them out. They are these molecules attached to the pleasure sensors in our brain, and that's what provides you with the ability to feel pleasure. And what they've done is they've overused those to the point where they no longer can receive those signals to feel better. And so a lot of people who've been using drugs or drinking alcohol for a very long time have no ability to feel pleasure. Things they used to enjoy are just blah. Everything in life is just blah. So it makes it really, really hard to get those people to realize that life can get better. Now, that goes away. You know, those pleasure sensors will re-engage and they will regenerate themselves, but it takes a little bit of time.
I look at antidepressants similar to what insulin is. The body needs it.
Yep.
We wouldn't deprive someone of insulin if they needed it. And when you are really depressed, an antidepressant is what's needed.
Absolutely, very true. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So where does fentanyl fall in that?
Fentanyl is in the opioid.
Opioid?
Mm-hmm. I believe, and I don't know if I want you to quote me on this, but I think that's a synthetic opioid. That's like incredibly more powerful than the normal opioids you would get like from your doctor or whatever. In fact, my understanding is that they've even started to issue hazmat suits to police departments when they search vehicles concerned about fentanyl in them, because you can have a reaction from it just by getting it on your skin. And then that's the other really, really dangerous thing about this is when you're buying this stuff off the streets, you don't know what they're mixing with it. People have died from they think they're getting heroin and they're getting heroin mixed with fentanyl, you know. So instead of being, you know, this level of powerful, it's this level of powerful, and they overdose because they don't know what they're doing. I have people all the time who say, all the time's wrong. I have people who come into treatment and you know, you'll do an intake history with them. Say, were you on any medication? Says, yeah, I was taking an antidepressant, but I stopped taking it when I started using meth because it made me afraid. I'm like, so you're not taking the thing that's made in a laboratory and prescribed medication, you're choosing to take something that's made in somebody's bathtub out of battery acid, and who knows what all this goes in there. All right, anyway, yes?
But wasn't OxyContin was first marketed as a safe
Absolutely.
drug?
If you hang with me, I've got some data about that. So hang on, that is absolutely true. That's basically, OxyContin is where this whole thing started. All right, so here's our goals with this grant and the goals for their organization. We want to reduce the number of people with an opiate use disorder. We want to increase healthcare settings that can catch this earlier. If we can catch somebody while they're using 10 or 12 pills a day instead of 50 pills a day, we can treat them much more. Their detox is less, their withdrawal is much less painful, and we can get them off that in a shorter period of time. We want to increase access and care and coordination to evidence-based treatment, including medically assisted treatment, including drugs to help them stay with the program long enough before they die or quit the program. Which is the other thing I want to say. The reason opiate use overdoses are so high is because of that very thing we talked about, tolerance. Remember when I said that if you or I try to use 80 pills a day, we'd die? You get somebody who's been in treatment for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe they were in jail for a couple of weeks and they haven't used an opiate for a month. Their tolerance is back down to 0. They walk out the doors of that jail or that treatment center and use how much they were using before and they're dead. So that's part of the big reason why this is such a big deal. Okay, we also want to increase the number of physicians. There's so few physicians who prescribe Suboxone, which is the drug of choice. It doesn't have much in the way of addictive properties, much less than the things that that they're taking for pain or off the streets. So we'd like to get more physicians who want to be involved in this. And then the other thing I want to talk about is reducing opioid deaths. Has anybody heard of Narcan? Yeah. Naloxone is the active medication in that. What Narcan is like a miracle drug. You got somebody down here on the floor who's seizing and about to die, and you give them a shot of this, and most of the time it'll bring them back.
Immediately.
You got experience with that?
Well, in the legislature.
Okay.
We use it all the time.
Oh, the legislature is using it. Okay, now speak for yourself.
Just tell me if I say something wrong, okay? But it's incredible what that can do. So we are using these funds that we have been given, and part of my job is to go out to every sheriff's office and EMT, and I've been, in the month I've been here, I've probably been to 10 different counties already, and telling them that we will buy this for you. We will get you as much of this as you need, so that every one of your EMTs has it on the truck, every one of your sheriff's officers has it in their car. Because you never know when you're going to come across somebody who that can be the difference and save their life. So I think that's really huge. And then educate communities about these things, I think, is really huge. So many of us, and I don't want to say this negatively, because I was that way too. If it doesn't slap us in the face, we tend to see it, it's something I'll deal with later. You know, it's something that doesn't really affect me, but man, it does, and you never know. You never know when it's going to affect you or your neighbor or your niece or your nephew, or you just... So it's important that we all, I think, learn about this stuff. Okay, real quick. Here's what we're trying to do to help people. First of all, screening. Are you a physician? Okay. Just one of the things we want to do is help doctors' offices be able to screen for this, because a lot of times you'll find doctors' offices will, if somebody comes in with a broken leg or whatever, people lie about their addiction. I'm just telling you. You always know when an addict's lying because their lips are moving. So they're not going to tell you. So we have to get a screening process at that level, because they're not going to come run into our treatment center and say, "Oh, I need help, please help me." It's not the way it works. So what we got to do is get people on board for screening, asking more questions. And if you're not sure, or if the family's not sure, then call somebody and we'll talk you through some of the things we see. Yeah. Oh, I thought you had your hand up. I'm sorry. And then brief intervention. Anybody seen that intervention show on TV? That's horrible. I hate it. But it's how they do interventions with people. There's one thing about this that I know from the bottom of my soul, and that's that addicts or alcoholics will not seek help or accept help until the consequences of continuing to use become greater than their fear of change. I'll say that again. They will not seek or accept help until the pain and the consequence of continuing to use become greater than their fear of change.
I don't know if they do it here in Kansas, but I do know some places in Oklahoma. If you apply for a job, you're screened. And if it comes up that you're on narcotics, you don't get the job. Is there a way then that maybe that business could help that person go and get help, or is that against the law?
No, absolutely not against the law. Many employers have what's called an EAP, an Employee Assistance Program, and if they see them, that this is a disease according to the CDC, and so one of the things that employers need to provide is an outlet to get this disease treated just like you would cancer or anything else. The problem is that you have to have a fairly large company to be able to do that, and then finances get involved in there. It's so difficult to hire people for those entry-level jobs that honestly most of the fast food places, convenience stores, most of those people that pay minimum wage are happy to have somebody, and they kind of look the other way. So we can do it, and it's doable, and I wish we did it more. But economics figures in there just a little bit.
But if you haven't hired him yet, you're not going to put him in a treatment plan.
Well, in an interview, sure, absolutely true.
Can't do that.
I mean, you can screen, I think you can screen, anybody, just tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you can do a drug screen.
Oh, absolutely. They'll do a drug screen.
Yeah, because I had to do one before I showed up at my job, so, and they wouldn't hire me if it was. Anyway, and the other thing that I want to do is I want y'all to have somebody to call. I want y'all to have somebody to call if someone you know is maybe in trouble. Because that's the biggest thing we're missing, is just not knowing what to do. People think that in order to call the treatment center, you have to have all this information and they'll track you and you got to have all this insurance and you got to whatever. I can tell you, if you pick up one of my cards and if you know of somebody that needs help, call me and I'll call them. Or I'll get with the family and I'll help. Or call CKF and talk to their admissions folks. I'm going to get to what the criteria are for this thing here in a minute. I keep jumping around all over the place. Now we get to what you brought up. December 12th, 1995 is the birth of this. That's when OxyContin was approved for use in the United States. That's when the birth of this crisis came about. Very shortly after that, my understanding is and you've been doing this a long time too, the dosages were like 20 and 40 milligrams. Immediately they upped it to 80 milligrams, and then 4 years later they upped it to 160 milligrams. Those tablets were not sold back in this era. You know why they upped it to here?
People develop intolerance.
Yeah, wasn't working as well as it did before, so let's give them more. And then they upped it again. They doubled it again. Simply because the same medication wasn't working. Who's not going to know that that's a bad idea? Yeah. They actually advertised OxyContin and because it was time-release component that guaranteed that it would not be addictive. They advertised at one point that it has as little as a 1% chance of addiction, which is it's ludicrous and it's a lie. And it's only to make money. So, fortunately, doctors and pharmacies have begun to recognize this. But it's like this pendulum shift. We went from anybody who has pain. Oh, I was going to add to that other thing. You wear the vital signs, you know, your heart rate, your blood pressure, and all those things. They added a fifth vital sign. How long ago do you think that was?
2 years.
2 years ago? They added a fifth vital sign, which was pain. 1 to 10, give me your pain scale. Well, I'm an 11. Nobody's an 11. But you say what you want to get what it takes to get what you want. And so doctors then started getting judged on whether or not they were taking care of their patient's pain by the insurance companies. The insurance company has them fill out this thing that says, how are you dealing with this person's high blood pressure? How are you dealing with this person's low heart rate? How are you dealing with this person's respiration? How are you dealing with this person's pain? And if you're not taking an active role in lowering their pain, you're not doing your job, and we're going to reimburse you less. That's just a setup. And I'm not saying there's enemies here. I'm just saying that this is how it came about. And there's, lobbyists and people have lots and lots of money to get things done. So anyway, I said there's a pendulum. So we went to where the other part of this is we've got pill mills out there. You guys know there's pill mills out there, right? Whose only sole reason is to make money by giving people medication as much as they can get them. Many of them are being shut down, many are still active. But there's lots and lots of really good doctors out there, and they're trying to see 3 or 4 people an hour and get everybody taken care of, and they see the same person coming back and complaining about their pain, and this isn't working, and this isn't working. And sometimes it just wears them out. Sometimes they just get worn down, and they say, okay. And so it's just a messed up system. Other than the OxyContin people, I don't know that there's a bad guy. There's just a system that's a mess. So
what other tool does a doctor have to control pain?
Well, what we need to start doing, that's a great point, by the way. We need to look outside the box instead of just giving them something that was never intended to be a long-term pain relief anyway. We need to make better use of chiropractors. We need to make a better use of pain clinics. where they can do, they've got amazing things they can do with back surgery now, with lasers and all sorts of stuff that you used to not be able to do. We need to try and find the source of their pain. And then if all the things that we've tried don't work, then part of what we have to do is educate people that no one guaranteed us in this world we're ever going to be completely pain-free. I'm in my 60s and I wake up every morning stiff and sore. And I don't take a pill for it because I know that's just part of it. So we have to help people understand. The other thing that happens is, what I like to do when I was running the treatment center was we would try and get people off as many of those medications as we could while we were there and see what their pain level really was. It was amazing to almost every one of them how little pain they had. They may have been prescribed opiates for hurting their knee 20 years ago and been taking it all the way through. The knee's probably completely healed by now. They may not have any pain at all, but they are so addicted to the medication. So what we got to do is we got to help them find different ways. We need to listen and we need to understand, but we also have to employ addiction professionals to help them see that some of this is not physical. Some of this is addiction. Make sense? Okay. Now, the pendulum has swung the other way, and we've got doctors who are now saying, I will not give you any more long-term meds. So what we've created now is we've created a bunch of people who are hooked, a bunch of people who already are on this medication, and they don't have any way to get off. The doctors don't have any more time than they did when they started medicating these people. They don't have time to help them figure out how to get off of it. So now that's what we've got. We've got people who steal from family. How sad is it? I'm guessing you guys have read this in the paper or seen it on TV about someone whose family member was going through an end-of-life incident on hospice, and the kids are stealing their meds. So they ran out of morphine when they're dying because their kids were stealing their meds. You got people who work for contractors who will go in and work on somebody's bathroom, and the first thing they'll do is go to the medicine cabinet and take all your opiates. People stealing stuff and pawning stuff.
Or they're doctor shopping like crazy.
Absolutely. And K-Trax has stopped that some, but it still happens if the people aren't on their toes. Very good point. If the doctor's offices and pharmacies aren't on their toes, they can doctor shop a lot. Okay. So, as I said, this has morphed into something even more deadly. If they can't support themselves, I know whole families whose entire family way of life, what they do for a living is sell drugs. Mom, dad, grandpa, one of the kids will have some sort of a medical ailment, and they'll each get 120 opiates a month, and then they'll go sell them for $10 a pill. So they're making, I don't know, what's 120 times 4 times 10? That's pretty good money. So, I don't know, it's a whole business we've created. So here's what they do. Get prescription drugs from the streets, they steal from family and friends, steal at work, and if they can't do anything else, they go buy heroin, which is much, much, much cheaper. All right, laying the groundwork for heroin addiction. If you've used prescription opiates, your likelihood of being addicted the very first time you use heroin is 75%. Drastically increases. 75% of new heroin users started out on prescription drugs. So I think that's where we have to start. I think we have to continue to treat the heroin folks, but we also have to get a handle on this prescription drug stuff. There's a 40% greater chance of abusing heroin if you have used prescription medications.
How do you define abuse?
Using more than you're prescribed.
So if you're using the amount you're prescribed, but you're still addicted.
True. Well, except for if you're addicted, you won't be able to keep using that same amount for very long. It's part of the process. This is a progressive disease. It isn't just progressive some of the time, it's progressive all the time. And what I've seen when people tell me that generally is they're not telling me the whole truth, or B, they're using something else. They're drinking to supplement it as well. They're using benzos to supplement it as well. They'll tell me, I'm just using that as prescribed. So usually the people I see coming through, I just don't know very many times that someone is addicted and only uses the exact amount they're prescribed. It just doesn't happen. The other thing about benzos I want to tell you about, Benzodiazepines is exactly like alcohol in pill form. It does the exact same thing to your body. So people come in and they are so protective of wanting to keep their Xanax. They're drinking a liter a day, but they're only taking one Xanax every 4 hours. And I had another guy who was drinking. He'd never gotten a DUI in his life, but his doctor put him on an anti-anxiety med, and he took that with his alcohol, and he blacked out. So you got to be real careful about mixing medications. Talk about how this affects women, since much of our audience here is women. Researchers didn't really start looking at substance abuse among women until the 90s. Women tend to be more dependent upon all drugs than men. Something about the female makeup, you tend to be more susceptible to becoming addicted. It's especially true of alcohol, marijuana, and opioids. Women also find it harder to quit, and relapse is much higher among women than it is among men. Overdose is somewhat less among women because women generally have a tendency to take lesser amounts, partially because they're smaller in stature, but also partially because men are more risk takers than women, and they'll push the limit more than women will. The concept of tolerance is equally dangerous, though, among men and women, and women's overdose rates are rising. Because even though where you started out at is less, you're still going to become addicted to a greater extent. Okay, some things to watch out for. If someone in your life you're concerned about, these are some symptoms and some signs you can watch for. Significant changes in behavior. I always say when I'm working with family members, they can hide their drinking. They can hide their using way better than you can ever be at catching them. They know more places to hide. They know more ways to lie. They know more of that. What they can't change is their behavior. And they'll revert to what addicts act like when they're using. So, some of those changes in behavior can be sleeping more, especially with opiates. You'll find people that lock themselves in their bedrooms and don't come out much. Women will stop spending time with their children, and they'll be in their bedroom with the door shut or in the bathroom with the door shut. Men will be gone, not paying attention to their kids, not going to their games and that kind of thing. You'll also see people isolated. They're more afraid of having to stop using and have nothing to fall back on than they are of being alone. And they kind of want to be alone because then because what are you going to tell them if you think they're using? You need to stop. And they don't want to hear that, and they don't want to have to face it, so they isolate themselves more. You find more secretive behaviors. People tend to anger much more easily. I want to tell you that I love my son. I wouldn't trade that young man for anything in the whole world. But I know that when he was active using meth, I trade sides of the bed with my wife because I was afraid he'd come hurt us, because he was that angry all the time. And it wasn't him. Paranoia. Methamphetamine, people are very paranoid. People who are on opioids also tend to become paranoid. They think people are talking about them. When there's people over there, they think that they're calling the FBI to come get them. Decreased interest in family areas of interest. If they used to like fishing but don't fish anymore. If they used to like to go to Christmas or Thanksgiving and they don't do that anymore, you need to probably be concerned. Changes in friends. If they no longer see the old friends they had in high school or college or people they used to hang around with, but they're seeing different people, it's probably because those people don't want to hang around with them anymore, and they don't want to have to justify their drinking or using to those old friends. Missing funds. I'm telling you, addicts are so sneaky. They can make up the best stories, and they'll get you to buy it. You gotta trust your gut. You gotta, this ain't right. Because they'll get you to believe it. Don't you remember, Mom, you paid for that? Whatever the other day, that's where that $50 went. If they've been responsible, if they've had a job, and those things are no longer there, then those are things you need to watch out for as well. Okay, what can I do? Trust your gut. Listen to if we'd have listened to ourselves earlier, I don't know if we'd have stopped this or gotten help sooner, but we very much might have. So, Trust your own instincts. Talk to someone who can help. There is no shame in just calling up somebody who works at a treatment center and say, I'm really worried about such and such. What do you think? And just bounce ideas off somebody. You're not in it by yourself. That's the most horrible thing, is being all alone and not having somebody to talk to. Educate yourself. There's lots of stuff on YouTube. There's lots of stuff you can read about addiction and about enabling behavior. Again, alcoholics and drug addicts will not seek or accept help until the consequences of continuing to use become greater than their fear of change. And so when we enable them, we're not enabling them, we're enabling their disease to get stronger. We're allowing them to get sicker. And I've had parents say, but I love him to death. And yeah, you are. You're loving him to death. Would you rather him be mad at you, or would you rather go to his funeral? Because that may be your choices. Lose the stigma on judgment. I've worked with people from the best of families and what you would think are the worst of families and everywhere in between, and this thing doesn't pick and choose. It'll take anybody. It doesn't mean you're bad parents. None of us got a book to be perfect parents. What we got was the ability to love our kids through thick and thin. And the greatest gift I've ever been given in my life is when my son in the car said to me, Dad, you never gave up on me. And that's why I'm still here. I'll never, ever forget that. Again, become willing to allow them to face their consequences and reach out for help. You don't have to do this alone. I'm going to skip some of this because we're about out of time. Here are the things that we try and do. People have been a lot focused on let's do 30-day or 60-day or 90-day and lock them up long enough that they get better. That's not what I found when I was in the treatment industry. We did really great treatment for 30 days. But if they didn't have a plan of action and follow a plan of action, they'd almost always relapsed. So what we're trying to do is intervene on what happens after they get started on the right track. We make sure everyone has a recovery coach, someone who is in recovery themselves who can help them when they're just down. We have an app that we're going to start the 1st of next month, which they can put on their phone. It reminds them of when their appointments are for their outpatient. It reminds them when their AA meetings are. One of the cool things I saw somebody do on this, you can set a reminder that goes off every day. This guy recorded his 5-year-old saying, Daddy, I don't like it when you drink. And it goes off and plays that for him every day. And helps him stay motivated. We're starting telehealth for those people out in western Kansas that are, 2.5 hours from a treatment facility or even an individual counselor, or we can have groups online. We can at least find some way to reach those guys. I've got a community meeting like this set up in Washington, Kansas. I've got one set up in Ellsworth. I've got one set up in Manhattan. So we're reaching out to get people some help. And then we talked about the treatment possibilities. We talked about Narcan. I want to make sure that everybody knows about Suboxone and Narcan, so read up on that. That's the First Responder's Guide to Narcan. Okay, people think there's a lot of rigmarole about getting into this program. It's a really, really difficult form that you have to fill out. Are you a Kansas resident? Yes. Have you been diagnosed or could you be diagnosed with an opiate disorder? Yes. Do you have health insurance? No. Call me up. I will make sure we get that person into a treatment center. We will pay $2,000 of their insurance. If they need detox, we'll pay another $1,000 to get them detoxed. That's it. That's all you got to do. We want to use this grant to help actual people. So if you need help, grab one. If you know somebody who needs help, grab one of my cards. That's all there is to it. I don't think I'm going to have time for the YouTube video because we're just about out of time here. Okay, this is the same thing. We talked about what they received and we talked about who qualifies. Adults who are Kansas residents have a problem with opioid use and do not have insurance. Or some people on the marketplace have insurance, but it doesn't cover substance abuse benefits. And if it doesn't, then you're also qualified for this. This is our website. If you don't feel like calling me, get on here and you can send us an email or check on treatment services. You can also see that form under there as well.
You said earlier was that you got a lot of education while your son was in treatment. And I think that was one of the things that I loved about the treatment program we had here, that 1 week of family
Yep.
week, when the whole family was there to spend time with both the patient and the family and the counselor.
Because we need as much help as they
Addressing the
do.
problems that, and making people accountable,
Yep,
both directions.
absolutely. Yes, sir.
You mentioned something early about, I think it was either Kentucky or West Virginia.
Ohio and West Virginia
Ohio
are
and
the two
West
with the,
Virginia.
with the biggest
Okay.
problems.
From a rural perspective, I remember reading an article that had, they were talking about, it was an article actually about demographics and about population shifts from rural to urban.
Right.
And that it's not all about people moving, but about death rates in rural areas, and mainly attributable to the opiates crisis and so on.
And
How-
no places for help, you know?
Right, that was gonna be my question. Is it more a matter of funding or more a matter of being able to have adequate service providers, or a combination of?
Combination. I think it's three things. I think it's, there's no money to be made out there, you know, because if you're in a county of, 5,000 people, in a city of 1,500 people, you're not gonna make a living as a substitute.
Well, because you talked about that pathway.
Yeah.
And it almost, the way I read it, and the way I've come to view this opiate crisis in rural areas is more about despair than anything else.
Yeah, they just give up,
Yeah.
absolutely. But, so, I mean, are we doing as much as can be done? Absolutely not, but we gotta start somewhere. And what we're trying to start with is providing telehealth for people who have absolutely no meetings of any kind or anything to go to. We're having a recovery coach who will call that person every week, and if they don't reach them, they'll go try and find them at their house, so they have someone to be accountable for, even if they're out in the boonies. And so we have to start somewhere. And why I think the grant is nice, because it's not based on somebody making money off of it, because just like anything else, if you're in a business that you have to pay your employees out of what you make from the people there, those people are going to remain unserved.
Can I ask you just one more question?
Absolutely.
It's from
What you want?
kind of wraps up those other questions from a holistic perspective. Do we face things in Salina and Saline County, like low wages and low educational or skill attainment that help to contribute to? Are those contributing factors to the
Yeah,
likelihood of abuse and addiction?
I want to say yes and no, okay? And I'll tell you why I'm saying that. Because the low socioeconomic people do have a tendency to try to tough things out and not seek help as often. But some of the people from the cities that I've worked with highly educated people, often think they're too smart for the program.
Pot and alcohol are basically the same thing. I mean, they some people become addicted to it, some people don't.
Mhm.
I mean, it's the same way. Same way with pain pills. Like I had my knee done, I didn't become addicted.
Yeah.
But there's some that the minute they take it, they're addicted.
And it's genetics. There's a genetic component to this. It tends to run in families. It doesn't always run straight downhill. Both my parents drank every day of their life. My mom till she dies. My dad's got dementia. He's still drinking every single day. And I drink half a beer and I don't want any more. I want to go back to what you said a little bit, because I don't think there's any bad or good about any of this stuff. I don't think alcohol's bad. I don't think it's good. I think it just is. I don't think pot's bad or good. I think it just is. Prescription medications have a very big place in this. But I think we have to be careful about the things that we can take to extreme. And I also think we have to pay attention to, is this something that I want in my life or not? If it is, fine. But then be aware that you're much more likely to be addicted to something if you use it than if you don't.
Well, thank you so much.